One word, two words, one sentence. What can you accomplish? What can you accomplish with just a sentence? I've told you this before. I could accomplish a lot as a child with a simple sentence. Maria, sandwich. I would say to my maid, a sandwich please, Maria. She would bring me a sandwich. Much is accomplished. A confident word with power behind it. When we are on a train carriage, and someone is sitting on our seats and my wife is embarrassed to ask the person to move, and I say, excuse me, you seem to be in our seats. And the man says, can you not find another seat? And I say, you will move from your seat. Prophetically, he did. A confident word. Words by an officer at an airport. While a passenger, an officer boards the plane and says, excuse me, sir, please follow me. You follow her. You do, especially if they are carrying a gun. We are used to words having authority. We are. In some way, at least in these situations, you may speak with your children with authority, maybe with a spouse, maybe with a neighbor or a friend. Would you speak with a demon with authority? Would you speak to a fever as if it was a thing, like Jesus rebukes a fever? If we saw someone do the stuff that Jesus did in this passage, we would have to join them in verse 36, being amazed and saying, what words, what power. Jesus continues to show us in the Gospel of Luke what the kingdom that he is king of is like. He's going to do that by the miracles, and the first miracle being casting out a demon, that's significant. He's going to do that with his teaching with authority. He's going to tell us what his kingdom is like, and that is great for us, because if you are a child of God this evening, you go, this same Jesus is my Jesus, I belong to him, so I don't have to be afraid. So that comforts you now, but it comforts you towards a forever where you know this is just a picture of, it's a sample. So Jesus is going to do all this stuff in a different place, not in Nazareth this time, where he was rejected, but in Capernaum, still in Galilee, northwest Galilee, in a synagogue much like this. And you remember, synagogues were places of learning, but not always places of believing. Much like I gave you that challenge 2 weeks ago, you can be in the church building, hearing all sorts of things, but not necessarily believing what you hear. Fun fact for you, that is a synagogue actually in Capernaum, and that won't have been the one that Jesus preached at, but there is some black basalt underneath the foundations that don't line up quite correctly, and it's probably that one that Jesus will have said these words. So we're going to see something of Jesus' authority, that Jesus teaches with authority, that Jesus has authority over demons, that Jesus has authority over illnesses, sicknesses. He is the one that has so much authority, he has the last word. Let's talk about that. Because authority we understand, don't we? You understand that. Particularly in this culture, we love the authority of experts. Don't we? If I tell you something, you're like, well, Tiago doesn't even have a degree. What does he know? If I quote a statistic, all of a sudden, oh, what's going on here? He knows something. Okay, or he knows the people who know. If I quote a study was done that said that young girls who curl their hair tend to only marry in their 40s. You're like, oh, there was a study? Oh my goodness. Wow, okay. All of a sudden there's authority, right? And the more stuff I quote, the more maybe academic accolades I give you. I have a PhD, or I'm a fellow professor, or whatever, professor emeritus, or whatever. There's less talk back. The more authority, less talk back from people. Sometimes our authority is derived from someone. Well, Dad said I was in charge. Authority from someone bigger, right? Sometimes from something like, my status is, I'm the boss here. I'm really not, but it's an example. For first century Jews, it wasn't very different, was it? At the time of Jesus, if the following centuries are anything to go by, whenever a rabbi spoke, he would quote loads of other rabbis, and that's where he got his authority from. That was his statistics. That was the stuff of the day. And then all of a sudden, like we said last week on our sermon on forgiveness, Jesus says, I don't need to go anywhere. I am the one who teaches with authority. You've heard it said, but I say to you, my voice matters more now. The fact that Jesus doesn't just teach with authority, which is shocking enough, but the fact that people can't talk back, they don't know what to say back to Jesus, that makes them amazed in our passage. Read it again with me, verse 31. Then he went down to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and on the Sabbath he taught the people. They were amazed at his teaching because his words had authority. And although we tend to distrust authority, look at how Jesus uses his. And when we do, it brings us comfort and hope. The Jesus who says, I say to you, is the Jesus who is saying, you don't need to listen to anyone else. It's part of what our passage is here for. Do you treat Jesus like the only one whose authority matters? I love that universally in all cultures, kids do this. If mother says no, they go and ask dad. They go and ask grandparents. Grandparents will never say no to anything short of murder. And so, are we people who get an idea in our minds about what God is like, what he teaches on a particular subject that's controversial in our culture, and we just keep asking until we find someone who says, actually, this verse doesn't really mean that? Or are we people who say, Jesus has said it, therefore I believe it? Of course, you can ask questions, but once you are someone who knows that you can trust Jesus, why not trust everything he says? So Jesus has authority, but our biggest point tonight is to think about how he has authority over demons. Let's read some bits of that passage again. In the synagogue, there was a man possessed by a demon, an impure spirit. He cried out at the top of his voice, "Go away! What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," Jesus said sternly. "Come out of him." And a demon threw the man down before them all and came out without injuring him. Let me just ask you plain and simple, okay? Because you may have been shocked by that brutish reading. How do you decide what's crazy to believe and what's normal to believe? Because I don't want to just read this passage and there's a demon in here, and I mean, we don't talk about this stuff, do we? Do you talk about this at school? Talk about this at your workplace? No. I don't want to assume anything. And earlier in this week, I was chatting to a minister in Brazil, a friend of mine, and I was just talking to him about this passage and about some preconceptions our different cultures have. And he said, I wouldn't have to ask the questions you're going to ask tonight if I was preaching on this passage, because I'm in Brazil. I tell people demons exist, and they just go, well, yeah, like most people would. What questions would I need to ask? Do you find it troubling to believe in demons, in unseen spiritual forces of darkness? Is that difficult for you when we read that in the Bible? Is it difficult for us because we are such children of the Enlightenment that we are stuck between rationalism over here, and it's like I've got to have an argument for something, otherwise I don't believe it, or empiricism over here, where if I don't have an experiment to prove that demons exist, I can never believe it? Are we so affected by this cultural heritage here in the West that we read the Bible here and we end up not believing it? We say, well, I'm sure this was just a mental health struggle. Just needed some pills. It's dangerous to ignore that Jesus really does have authority over demons. Listen to Peter when he says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour, looking to do damage in the spiritual lives of people." Ephesians 4:27, in that context where Paul talks about how to live your new life as a Christian, like be angry and do not sin, don't let the sun go down in your anger. He says, verse 27, do not give the devil a foothold. That means this isn't just here in a gospel, but the whole worldview of the Bible is telling you and me that there are spiritual forces of darkness that want to destroy us. And that if we don't live holy lives, Paul seems to be saying, we give them space, we give them room. Imagine being in that synagogue, approached by an impure spirit, a demon, clearly having taken over the body of a person, walks towards you, shouting. How would you feel? My friend Tom tried to share the gospel in the city of York, in the city center one night, and some people clearly saw him holding a Bible in his hand, and they said from a distance, I can't remember whether I'm imagining this, but he said holding some chains in their hands. This was several years ago. Are you the God Squad then? He said, no, we're not. It's scary. This kind of stuff is really scary. We lose that when we just gloss over the verse. That's why I'm camping around it so much tonight. You may have watched something like the Dark Knight trilogy. And you remember Batman's arch-enemy, Bane. Got a picture of him here. Tom Hardy. I can't even do the voice. It's so scary. And he's going to fight Batman in the darkness. And Batman is just getting beat up. And he just presses a button in his gadget, turns all the lights off, and Bane says, you want to make use of the dark? You think I'm afraid of the dark? I was born in it. And I was like, I was watching this movie. I'm like, terrified. If you're a first century human being here and you see a demon-possessed person and you are powerless to deal with the dark, you're afraid. You feel hopeless. In this world of fear and darkness, Jesus comes to do the first massive miracle in the Gospel of Luke. No fight in the dark, no gimmicks like people at the time, no potions, no words of power or magic or fancy stuff. Simply verse 35. Be quiet. Come out of him. And then what looks like an attempt for the demon to, as he's leaving, chuck the man down on the ground and hurt him, doesn't hurt him at all. And we learn that when Jesus is near, his authority is such that no one can be broken, no one can be destroyed. When Jesus is near, when Jesus is trusted, when Jesus is acting, you and I don't have to be afraid, even if it's invisible powers of darkness. Imagine this. I was catching up with a friend earlier this week who is a mental health nurse. And I said, what kinds of things do you deal with in your work? So he works with, so he's a CAMS nurse. Is there ever a time when you look at things and you say, this is more than physical, there's something darker, deeper here, spiritually speaking? He said, yeah. He sees a lot of people who struggle with psychotic episodes where they hallucinate, they see things that are not there, where they hear voices of things and people that are not there. He said to me, medication sometimes will help. But there are some cases where two people experiencing the same thing, no amount of medication, no amount of talking therapy or counseling seems to deliver or help that person. Do we have room in our view of the world for what Jesus is doing here? So imagine the shock of these people, seeing someone not in the right mind, but they meet Jesus. One sentence. It's fine. I love that. Verse 36, everyone's amazed. What words these are. With authority and power. So let's be real for a second. Demons and spiritual forces of darkness exist. The Bible says it. I'm not saying every mental health problem, there's a demon in a cupboard somewhere. We don't go looking for a demon in every heart. But most cultures don't have a problem with this stuff. Should we? Above all, don't miss this. The comfort of knowing this Jesus with this authority. If Jesus can cast out a scary demon, is there anything he can't deal with? Is there anything invisible in our lives, any abstract emotion he can't handle? If he can handle a demon, the citizens of Jesus' kingdom don't have anything to fear. As Luther sings, the Prince of Darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word shall fell him. This is the Jesus that in 1 John 3:8 says this. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. That's the one that Paul says he's come to destroy the devil's schemes. And if we miss that, and if we don't get excited about that, it's because we don't realize that Jesus is here undoing all of the effects of the snake in the garden, all of the effects of the fall. One by one, Jesus is showing, guys, look at me. I'm going to undo all this stuff until I'm finished in the new heavens and the new earth. Are you coming? Are you coming with me? Do you believe in me, Jesus says. Is this how you see Jesus' authority? Ephesians chapter 2 says, if we are dead in our trespasses and sins, if our friends don't believe in Jesus, if that's you here this evening, Ephesians chapter 2 says, you are aligning your life with the spiritual powers of darkness. I'm not saying you're demon-possessed. I'm saying you are aligning your life with the spiritual powers of darkness. And you need Jesus. And he is the one here who has the authority to free us, our friends, our neighbors. And yet, just another quick thing here that Paul says in that passage that's on the screen. Read it with me. Verse 12 of Ephesians chapter 6. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Just an observation. If the evil in the world is because people are bad and they make bad decisions and that's it, we've got to either fix people or we've got to hate them. You and I fall into this default mode. Someone does something nasty to us, we hate them. Someone takes offense at our sharing Jesus with them, we go, well, I'm offended because you hate me. Paul is saying, there is something darker here. My struggle is not against another human being, but to pray that Jesus will deliver them, rescue them, save them. That's what we want to do. Pray that Jesus will be at work in this way. So how does this little episode here help you see the spiritual battle for the souls of other people and how Jesus is the only one we can pray will rescue? So that was the big point. Jesus has authority, and authority over demons, but also authority over illnesses. Let me ask you this. In the last few verses, what do you do when you hurt yourself? Kids, if you hurt yourself, what do you do? Where do you go? Any ideas? So you got a big gash in your arm, bleeding out. I mean, that's quite serious. What do you do? To mum, not dad. She's the GP. That is correct. That is correct. Okay? If there's something seriously wrong with you, you don't want to mess around with DT engineering dad, do you? He's not going to fit. You're not a machine. Maybe if your bike breaks down, dad. If you're watching from home, this is because dad is an engineer. It's not stereotypes, okay? And mum is a GP. I think you'll agree with me, regardless of your political stance, if you are a British citizen, or even if not, if you live in this country, you appreciate that the NHS is free at the point of delivery, right? Regardless of whether you're left, right, center, whatever other names you want to come up with, you love the fact that it's free when you need it. Now, I want you to imagine here, does that mean, because you know the NHS is there, whatever sickness you get, you're like, oh, that's fine. Just drive me to the hospital. Like, does that calm you? You know, if you need some stitches and you're like, oh, a nurse will do that. It's no problem. I don't even know if nurses can do that. Can they do stitch? I'm sure they can. It's fantastic, It's like, oh, they can do that. No, right? You don't just calm down because you know that there is some sort of help over there, because there are some things that even when you think there may be help, like a serious cancer or something, you're still terrified. Now, this is you in 2022, guys. Jesus is going to see Peter's mother-in-law. In the first century, no NHS, no hospitals. But I'll tell you what, I got some good news for you. You can go to, when you have, little problem, little sickness, however serious or mild, you can go to the temple of Asclepius, patron saint of, looking after you for diseases and illnesses. There weren't many doctors like Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke. And actually, the treatments weren't always very effective, because a lot of the times you would go to the temple of Asclepius and you would practice incubation, which is you sleep at the temple in the hopes that the god will appear to you in a dream and tell you, eat this plant and you'll be okay. I mean, if you've got a serious, fiery fever, is that comfort to you? No, it isn't. If you had been healed, or if you really wanted to be, you make a cast of your limb. You can leave it in the temple of Asclepius. In that culture, Jesus comes in, and he doesn't need a temple, a magical ritual, a potion. He doesn't need even to call on any gods. Verse 39. What does he do? What does he need to do? Look at it. He bent over her. He rebuked the fever. I mean, how did Jesus do it? Fever be gone. I don't know what he said. It's not even a one-hit wonder, by the way, because at sunset, when the Sabbath is over and everyone can move around without being judged, you've got what? Have a look at it. Verse 40. At sunset, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of illnesses. All. Laying hands on each one, Jesus healed them. Moreover, demons, plural. Imagine for a second here. This evening, you are a GP. This evening, you are a GP. Imagine that. Do you think, in the current climate, you would be overwhelmed by people with all kinds of illnesses coming to your practice? Do you think you might be overwhelmed? All kinds. Would it make it easier if in your patient list I said, I'll throw in a couple of demons? Any of us would be overwhelmed. Jesus, verse 40, lays his hands on each one. The touch of compassion, of warmth, of love. I mean, some of those people must have been oozing pus, bleeding out, all kinds of illnesses. Jesus loves them, touches them to heal them. How does he do that? The Jesus of the synagogue is also the Jesus of humble mothers-in-law and strangers. Jesus healed someone's mother-in-law. That's a miracle. It's a miracle even that Peter invited him to do so. This is massive, guys. Because just as Jesus' authority over demons shows in his kingdom, no one needs to be afraid of the powers of darkness. In his kingdom, no one needs to be afraid of sickness or death, whether Jesus heals them or not. But you might want to ask, why doesn't Jesus heal all of our illnesses all day today? If I asked all of you guys, you would say, we have various kinds of illness. Why doesn't Jesus heal us? That's a really good question. You can ask Andy. But last week in Nazareth, we saw that sometimes Jesus doesn't heal. Even in the Gospels, Jesus didn't heal because people came at him with the wrong motivation. Do you remember last week they said, why don't you do here the things that you did over there? And Jesus is like, you're missing the point. I'm not a slot machine. I'm not just here to make you escape suffering. So Jesus didn't always heal even then. But think about this, number 2. Jesus healed to show his message was true about the kingdom. It wasn't to prevent suffering. We are called to suffer if we are Christians. And instead of Jesus coming in and saying, hey, I'll take all your suffering away, he says, I will walk with you hand in hand through the suffering. Jesus may or may not heal today. He can. It's his choice. But the key consideration for us and the key thought is, would Jesus healing me and making me 100% healthy, would it glorify him? Would me suffering glorify him? So Jesus promises to walk with us. And so in that authority, that Jesus isn't overwhelmed. That Jesus uses his authority to heal, to rescue. He can undo the effects of our sin. I wonder. Think about this for a second as we finish. If you were in the same room as a child who is afraid of the dark, what do you say? What do you say? I mean, try the person next to you, just for 10 seconds. A child is afraid of the dark. What do you say? Go on. I wonder what you'd say. I wonder whether you would be any different if you met an adult who is afraid of the dark. An adult who is afraid of the dark inside their own minds for various reasons. An adult who is afraid of the dark of loneliness. If you say, there's nothing to be scared of, I'm like, you better hope there isn't, because otherwise that doesn't work. If there really is an awesome monster under your bed, that's going to do you no good, right? If there really is a demon in the closet, well, I'm not advocating there is. That's not going to help. But what if you could say, my friend, my brother, my sister, who is struggling with the dark, who is struggling with anxiety, who is struggling with a host of other things, if we could say, guess what? The dark is more afraid of Jesus than anything else. That would be an awesome thing to say to a kid or to a grown-up. That would be an awesome thing for all of us to believe. What do you do? What do you do with this? It's a bit heavy, isn't it, talking about demons and things. If you want to talk about it some more, come and find me. We'll book an appointment in the week. It's been brought to my attention that I say come and find me, but if you're over 18, basically you can never come and find me, because at the end of the service I'm talking with all the under 18s. So you can book me in the week and chat to me. The call for you is this now. Peter's mother-in-law has seen Jesus' healing power, how awesome he is, how fantastic he is. In verse 39, what does she do? She gets up and she serves Jesus. That's like a beautiful picture, a beautiful metaphor for what we do in response to Jesus rescuing us. Here's another. People try to misunderstand Jesus and stop Jesus, because you know what? I know that some of you young people feel like this about me, that when it's time to go home, you don't want to go home because I'm so cool, you want to be around me. You don't want to go home. You just want me all to yourself. I understand that. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Happened with Jesus. People come and look at Jesus and they say, hey, look at him there. Verse 42. People were looking for him. When they came to where he was, they tried to keep him from leaving them. He is mine. He is only for this. Jesus says, no. Here's your response. You must proclaim Jesus. Your friends must know about Jesus. That was his mission. That's why he was sent. He proclaimed. We have his proclamation here. Now we share him with others. What else can we do if we are rescued except proclaim Jesus? Let's pray now and ask him for his help before we sing our final hymn.